Welcome to Chasing Aesthetics, where fitness meets science.
I am from Iowa, United States, and just a little bit of background on myself is I am a coach for Revive Stronger. So I'm not sure how familiar your audience is with Revive Stronger, but those are Steve Hall, Pascal, Flor, Miguel, Blacutt, just a group of coaches there. And then I'm also earning my master's degree here in the States in exercise science at the University of Northern Iowa. So I'll have my master's degree in about 6 months here. So just have one semester left of that. And yeah, that's a little bit of background on me. I kind of got into lifting because I was forced to do it for American football and then started seeing some results with it. And then just kind of caught the bug of digging into the science and stuff like that. Really enjoyed it. Really started seeing progress. Really started seeing how it benefits every area of my entire life. And then I was like, hey, it'd be pretty cool if I could help other people get in better shape and then see how it can also benefit every area of their life. So that's a little bit of my background there.
Yeah, I think it's pretty good to know a little bit of you before talking about these things, because you're like a master in in exercise science, and we know that hypertrophy is not an easy way to progress, because sometimes it seems like it's like easier to progress in strength, but it's not that easy to progress in hypertrophy. So since I think of you about it, I would like to know a little bit about programming for bodybuilding, especially. So, what do we need to consider for hypertrophy goals when it comes to programming?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of the big four things to consider with programming, specifically with training for bodybuilding. We've basically got four things. So we've got your total volume. So volume I'll define as total weekly difficult sets per week. So sets within 3 or 4 reps in reserve. And then after volume, we've got your training frequency, how often you're training a muscle group each week. Then we have your intensity. So the intensity definition that we'll talk about first here is just how much weight is on the bar relative to your 1 rep max. So this can easier be said as what rep range you're working in. And then we also have your relative intensity. So this is like how hard you're actually training or how close to failure you're actually training. And with inside of those four like main variables that we have to manipulate for our training, the one that seems the most important is our volume. So the amount of hard sets we're doing per week, per muscle. So volume is probably the most important. It's also probably a pretty good idea to train a muscle group at least a couple of times per week. And this kind of allows you to spread that volume out a little bit more. And it seems as though like the muscle protein synthetic response. So when we stimulate a muscle, we elevate muscle protein synthesis, and then those proteins are literally like the development of muscle tissue. And that seems to be elevated for a few days after we train.
Yeah, for you.
So if we only trained once a week, then we could theoretically be missing out on a few days of where we could have stimulated protein synthesis and have it elevated a little bit more throughout the week. So our training frequency helps us kind of spread out that volume, have nice quality volume throughout the week, and also allows us to get those more frequent kind of blips in muscle protein synthesis to grow a little bit better. And then in regards to intensity or what rep range we're using, it's probably a pretty good idea to kind of stick in that 6 to 12 to 15, somewhere in there, that rep range on average. Now, I think that it makes sense to kind of go below this sometimes and above this sometimes, but on average, that's probably a pretty good general rep range. And we can, if you want to go into it more, why this might be the case, we can totally give it, but I'll just kind of give a general recommendation on these things first. And then as for relative intensity, it's probably a good idea to keep things within a few reps from failure most of the time. Just because if we're not training within a few reps from failure, we're probably not stimulating our entire muscle fiber. We're probably not sending that signal for growth as much. All right. So that's kind of a general overarching principles, but the main one that is probably most important is probably that total weekly volume.
Yeah. So summarizing that, we could say like volume is really the key driver for hypertrophy, right? And what's really important to make progress in hypertrophy is the total weekly volume. And we could say that frequency is a tool to manage that volume in order to get through that. Like we have like a set of volume, like a specific volume that we can't go over in each session. So that's why frequency it's a good tool to manage that weekly volume. And in terms of the intensity, the reps in reserve, I think as Ryan said, I think that we should keep the reps like close to failure, not exactly to failure every single time, but close to failure in order to reach that hypertrophy. So I think that's a good way to summarize it.
Don't forget to rate the podcast on iTunes and leave a review. May the aesthetics be with you.